Vanakkam. Hello friends. In the search for our genetic roots, we saw in the previous episode of how the Y chromosome D haplogroup out of Africa that is native to the Indian subcontinent today accounts for only 10% to 40% of the population. In trying to understand as to how or who brought in the 90 to 60% of today's Y chromosomes and from where, we went to the Eurasian steppe, the vast grasslands extending from Ukraine in the west to Mongolia in the east. Today, scholars the world over are agreed upon the fact that all the populations of the world migrated out of Africa at different points of time. The Eurasian steppe were populated by out of Africa migrants between 50,000 to 35,000 years ago. Then around 7,000 years ago, populations from the Caucasus region between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea went into the steppe regions, and the influx of this population led to a new breed of people being created, giving a rise to new cultures. J.P. Mallory, the American archaeologist, in his work In Search of the Indo-European, published in the year 1989, defines culture in archaeological terms as the recurrence of similar kinds of ceramic, tools, architecture, and most importantly, burial rituals over a designated area. Accordingly, the new culture that arose was named the Yamnaya, Yama meaning grave in Russian. That it means the god of death in Old Indic is no mere coincidence, as we shall see. The pit grave culture, the Yamnaya culture, was named so because, being a nomadic people, there were no remnants of their settlements anywhere except for their graves. And most of what we know today about this culture is recreated by looking at the grave itself, known as the kurgan, again a Russian term for a burial mound, where a burial chamber was made out of wood and earth and stones were heaped over it. Kurgans have been found all along the Eurasian river valleys, revealing the direction of migration of the people that started at around 4500 BCE. By around 3700 BCE, a very important culture known as the Mycop culture prevailed in the Caucasus. This culture was contemporaneous with the Ur-3 of Mesopotamia. Now we should remember that during this period, there were civilizations flourishing all around the South and West Asian regions of Harappa, Sumeria and Egypt. And this Mycop culture was very ostentatious as revealed by its graves that contained gold and silver jewelry, precious artifacts, lapis lazuli, besides fragments of textile, linen and cotton. It is very interesting to see how archaeologists have traced the cotton fragments to South India, that they were exported from these regions 3700 BCE, and they also deduce that cotton cultivation must have started in these regions, that is our Tamil country, around 5000 BCE. The Yamanaya were greatly influenced by the Mycop culture, and it is believed that they adapted the wheel and wagon from this culture. Excavations of various archaeological sites have led archaeologists to believe that the invention of the wheel must have happened parallelly in several places. Like for example, the solid clay wheel models excavated in the Harappan Valley are also predated to before 3000 BCE. So by 3300 BCE, the Yamnaya people, with their mobile homes on their wagons, started dispersing at a very fast rate towards the west and the east of the Ural mountains. The archaeologist Marija Gimbutas proposed a Kurgan hypothesis in the 1950s, wherein she envisioned these warlike Yamnaya people spreading their culture through means of militant tactics. She even coined the word Kurganized, which implied spreading of a cult by a small band who imposed themselves on the local elite. The Yamnaya migrations were definitely male-centered. Many of the Kurgan graves revealed male bodies, and though their spread was not exactly militant as Kimbutas put forward, neither was it very friendly. The region of the Pontic Caspian, from where the Yamnaya migration started, is today conceived as the homeland of Proto-Indo-European language family. And it is very interesting to see how the words exploring fauna and flora in these regions has helped archaeologists in identifying the PIE homeland. Words denoting the bees and honey have related cognates across all Indo-European languages. An intoxicating drink extracted from the honey, that is honey beer, was known as madhu in Old Indic, mead in English, Celtic and Germanic. It stood for wine in Greek, and even in the neighboring Finno-Uralic, madhu was mete. And here, the honeybee was not native to the regions east of the Ural Mountains, thus ruling out the whole of Siberia, Central Asian steppe of Kazakhstan, and much of northeastern Europe from the region of the PIE homeland. And the next most interesting feature, of course, is the horse and the word for the horse itself, again across Indo-European languages. So known in Latin as equus, in Gothic as aiva, in Old Irish ek, Hittite as asuva, Old Indic ashva, Avestan aspa, and Lithuanian asva. The horse was a symbol of power all across the steppe, and paleozoologists have established how wild horses were completely absent in the Near Eastern, Iran and Indian subcontinent till the beginning of the Holocene era itself. So that rules out all these regions from competing for the PIE homeland as well, thus leaving the Pontic Caspian Caucasus steppe region as the birthplace of the PIE. The Yamanaya spread both west and east of the Ural Mountains, carrying their PIE languages, and around 3000 BCE, during the westward expansion, evolved the corded ware pottery, a signature style of pottery always identified with the Yamanaya. Graves revealing ancient DNA in Germany, accompanied by this corded ware pottery, were found to carry 75% of Yamanaya ancestry and just 25% of the original out of Africa hunter-gatherer ancestry of the region. In some regions of Europe, the local ancestry was driven down to single digits. Genetic evidence shows that the Yamnaya expansions were male-centric, with a limited number of Y chromosome groups being extremely successful in spreading and influencing the genetic makeup of the local populations. And another outfall of this was the complete disappearance of the old languages and dialects spoken in the European regions. Today, all of Europe speaks PIE daughter languages from English to German to French, the only exemption being the language of Basque spoken in the small nation of Basque, which almost carries zero ancestry of Eurasian steppe population. So they got to maintain their genetic pool as well as their language and culture. In his book Early Indians, Tony Joseph draws a parallel of the Dravidian language group in the subcontinent that successfully withstood the onslaught of the incoming Indo-Aryan language and culture, still spoken by 20% of the population of the subcontinent. By 2500 BCE, a cooler, more arid climate took over the entire stretch of the Eurasian steppe, leading to retreating forests and retreating marshlands, as well as spreading of pastoral lands, environmental degradation that led to again new cultures being evolved. One such culture was the Sintashta culture that developed to the east of the Ural Mountains. Excavated between 1972 and 1987 in the Russian regions, the Sintashta graves contained not luxuries but weapons and armory, and David Anthony in his The Horse, Wheel and Language draws startling parallels between these graves and customs and rituals recorded in the Rig Veda. All the PIE cultures were very big on the horse sacrifice, and in some of the graves, the way in which the head of the horse has been decapitated using an axe, and the way in which the lower limbs, the legs of the horse, have been cut and placed across and on top of the graves are exactly the way in which this custom has been described in the Rig Veda. Parallels also include the description of a Kurgan mound itself in Rig Veda 10:18. Let them bury death in this hill. Let the fathers hold up this pillar for you. I shore up the earth all around you. Let me not injure you as I lay down this clod of earth. A precise description of a Sintashta grave. But what is even more intriguing is a grave that was excavated in the mid-Volga region of Russia in an area known as Samara, dated to between 2100 and 1700 BCE, a grave of a probable PIE speaker where Parpola has noted a human skeleton with a horse's head and records in his book, The Roots of Hinduism, of how this reminds him of the mythology of the saint Dadhyachi, where those of us who know the story, Dadhyachi Muni's head was beheaded and he was brought back to life, being replaced with the head of a horse by the Ashwin twins, who again in old Vedic mythology were the healers by using the Madhu Vidya, that is using honey. Now what Parpola finds intriguing is himself being of Finnish origin. In the Finno-Uralic folklore, there is a similar mythical story of Kalavela where a dead soldier, his mother, takes his beheaded body and tries to bring it back to life with honey being brought by bees from the heavens. The walled Sintashta settlements with their high watchtowers are a clear indication that by that time raids must have become endemic in those regions and warriors had to gather themselves in larger and larger groups. Soon they had to have a chief to lead them, and this chief was denoted by a PIE root reg, from which comes the English term regiment, regulator. This is also the root for the old Indic term Raj. And soon soldiers were being organized in large numbers and huge sacrificial feasts were being held to commemorate the victories in war. And how do we know this? In a pre-Sintashta grave in Russia dated to 2500 BCE, a single grave contained 40 horses whose heads were severed and neatly laid in 2 rows. Now, given the fact that a single animal yielded upwards of 200 kilos of meat, there must have been a crowd of thousands of soldiers to have partaken of a feast that served around 8,000 to 10,000 kilos of meat. The increased warfare, again necessity the mother of invention. It was in this region of the Sintashta that the light-wheeled spoked chariot was invented, and chariots were a great symbol of power. Not only were they very expensive to construct, but they required great skill to ride and also specially trained horses to pull. It is amazing to see how fossil evidence can be put together to recreate history, and David Anthony does one such interesting recreation by studying the dentures of these horse skulls excavated from these graves. He shows how chariots were used not just for warfare but also for races. By studying the disc cheek pieces of a pair of horses bridled to the right and the left of a chariot, he reveals how the right pulling horse was left to go free, while in the case of the disc cheek piece of the left pulling horse, an angular slot is given through which the horse could be pulled almost like a brake, making it to swerve left, a left-turning racing team. And he explains how in the Rig Veda, the chariot race was often used as a metaphor for life, and the Rig Vedic chariot teams always swerved to the left. War chiefs needed more and more wealth for their alliance building as well as to reward the armies after a victory, and being the herders that they were, they had already begun mining for its rich mineral reserves, especially copper. And there was a ready market in Central Asia, the Near East, that is Anatolia, today's Turkey, Egypt and Mesopotamia, where these metals and minerals were in great demand. The steppe herders arrived as traders, trading in metals and minerals, supplying weapons and warfare techniques, and soon they started intruding in the political affairs of the already well established dynasties who were ruling there. Rings a familiar bell, doesn't it? The demand for horses also increased manifold as the chariot warfare technique was adopted by the armies of the Near East and Mesopotamia. Soon, another daughter culture of the Sintashta, the Petrovka, was born, and they migrated further south into the Zervashan Valley in Kazakhstan, which had huge tin reserves. Tin, a very important metal to alloy copper, excavated between 1997 and 1999, the Zervashan Valley not only was famed for its huge tin reserves, but also as a breeding ground for the tens of thousands of horses that had to be supplied to the West Asian kingdoms. And this is supported by inscriptional evidence in the Ur Palace records, where it is inscribed that tin was worth 10 times its weight in silver and had to be imported at huge costs. Between 1850 and 1450, another culture evolved in the Kazakhstan valley out of the Petrova culture, known as the Andronova culture. They spread all over the Asiatic steppe lands and carried with them the Indo-Iranian language that branched out from Proto-Indo-Iranian at about 1700 BCE. And from this Indo-Iranian were born two sister languages which were well established between 1700 and 1500 BCE, the Indo-Aryan language, also known as Old Indic, and the Avestan Iranian, called Avestan because it was the language of the religion of Zoroastrianism, whose holy text was the Zend Avesta, and the scriptures of Avesta are considered to be contemporaneous with the earliest available Old Indic scripture, that is the Rig Veda. Many terms are found to be common to both, such as mantra for a prayer or spell. Yagna in Rig Veda becomes Yasna in Avesta, but a basic difference was that Avestan religion evolved as a way of protesting against the animal sacrifice of the Old Indic religions. The spread of the sister languages of Indo-Aryan and Avestan Iranian are traced through many linguistic markers. Around 1900 BCE, a next movement happens where the Indo-Iranian people move into a contact zone in Central Asia that is home to the citadels of the BMAC, that is Bactria Margiana Archaeological Complex, which we will continue to explore in our next episode. Vanakkam.